Alright, welcome to the Clip Studio Paint intro for my Grass and Fields expansion brush pack. This is a little introduction just to show you how the brushes work, and after this you can go watch the painting demo to see me use them if you want. You can download the brushes from my Gumroad page here, and while you're there, check out the first pack too if you want. Here's the one for Clip Studio Paint. They don't need to be used together, they can totally function separately. This one can function all on its own, but there's a greater variety if you use both because there's no overlap between them. So once you download the Clip Studio Paint zip file and unzip it, you can highlight all of these .sut brush files and drag them into your subtool panel. I highly recommend doing this instead of converting the ABR file. Even though you can technically just convert the original Photoshop ABR brush file, I spent hours making changes to these brushes to make them simpler to use and help them match up better with the original Photoshop brushes in this program, so I recommend using the .sut files. Before we get too far, I want to show you a little bit about how brushes work in Clip Studio so you can make changes as you paint if you want to. First, there are three main brush panels in this program. The first is the Subtool Selection panel here. This panel is called Subtool Brush in the window menu if you have the brush panel open, and this is where you pick your brushes from. Next, there is the Tool Property panel. This allows you to change certain aspects of the brush on the go as you paint from a smaller version of the major brush panel. This is a really useful feature. I wish Photoshop had it. It is called the Tool Property panel in the Window tab, and you can actually go into the full Subtool Detail panel and you can check and uncheck these boxes, which allows you to decide which settings you want to show up in the mini panel to use while you work. And I made choices about this based on how I tend to use these brushes, but you can totally feel free to edit them. Finally, there is the full-on brush editing panel called the Subtool Detail panel in the window menu. It's really important for me to know that there is a glitch where this panel refuses to show up that I've run into a few times, and if you run into this glitch, just try resetting your workspace to the default and then closing and reopening the program, and then click on this little wrench icon at the bottom right of the Tool Property panel, and for me that always makes it come back. There is a brush effect in Clip Studio that is different from any other program. It's called the spraying effect. I have it turned off on most of the brushes, but I have used it on some of the wildflower brushes. You'll know if this effect is on if this particle size slider shows up along with the particle density setting and this direction slider. The main reason I'm highlighting this is because on these brushes, you have to use the particle slider to make the flowers bigger, not the brush size slider. So remember this, if you're wondering why you're making your brush size bigger but the flowers aren't getting bigger, you have to use the particle slider instead. The particle size slider. Next, I want to bring your attention to this change brush tip color checkbox. It's what creates this color variation effect in some of the brushes. If you ever want to turn it off, just uncheck the box, and if you want to add it to a brush that doesn't have it, or if you want to change the amount of color variation, just head over to the color jitter setting on the full Subtool Detail panel and you can play around with these sliders here. Finally, I want to point out that some brushes are designed to stay oriented to the canvas vertically, while others are designed to follow your brush stroke. If you want to change this on a brush, head over to the brush tip area of the full Subtool Detail panel and click on this little pen icon to the right of the angle slider. If you set the brush to none, it will stay oriented vertically to the canvas, and if you select direction of line, it will follow your stroke. And there's different situations where each of these settings might be useful, so play around with it. The reason I didn't just include multiple versions of each brush is that there's just so many, there's already 144, and that already seemed like maybe too much, so totally feel free to delete any brushes you don't see yourself using, or save out versions, with property differences if you want to. These first few brushes are painting brushes. And if you've already got regular old painting brushes that you like using, no pressure to use these, but I just wanted to provide some painting brushes in the style I like using, so that if you're following along with the tutorials I make for this set going forward, you can use the exact same brushes as me. I've got a couple bristle textured painting brushes, a softer painting brush, a couple of detail brushes, and a rake brush. Next up are brushes for creating standard manicured lawns, like something you'd find in a front yard that has been mowed even by a lawnmower. This is a category of brush that my last pack did not have at all, so I wanted to make sure I added these. These brushes are all meant to be used in sideways motions, left to right. And there are a couple of block-in brushes, some detail brushes, and a glazed texture brush that has kind of a semi-transparent wash effect to it. And they can be used all together to paint a lawn like this, or they can be mixed in with the, wilder looking grass species to make areas with flat grass and areas with wilder, bushier looking grass, really whatever you want. Next up are the grass block-in brushes. Try them out, experiment, and figure out which ones you like best. They're all meant to be used in sideways motions, and there are a couple of brushes designed for painting the ground showing through, like in a patchy field. And then there's some shorter grass block-in brushes for the edges, near the exposed ground area for lower mossy grass. And I wanted to try to provide a much bigger variety of block-in brushes and grass shapes in this set compared to the last one. Following the block-in brushes, we have sunlight dappling brushes. These are designed to add sunlight and shadows to the middle of your fields. And when you brush them side to side like this, you can see that they show both distant grass blades and then also have gaps in the front that indicate grass blades, toward the front of where the brush is as well. Some of them are harder, some of them are softer, and they're all meant to be kind of used together to create sunlight dappling effects. Next, we get into the detail brushes. These dimensional grass details were painted with highlights and shadows built in, so the brushes have the most opacity where the grass blades would logically have a highlight on the areas where forms turn over. That way, when you use a light color against a dark background, the grass looks dimensional. And you can use these dark against light if you want also, but I think that they look best when used light against dark. These are meant to be used in small dotted strokes, placing grass details here and there until you get the effect you want. Moving on to the rest of the grass detail brushes, there is a bunch in this pack. These brushes are all also used in side-to-side motions. They are meant to be used all throughout the fields that you've blocked in to indicate different shapes, textures, dimension of the grass. You can use similarly shaped detail brushes across a whole field to show like one type of grass, one species of grass, or you can vary them in patches and sections to create a big natural looking wild field with a bunch of different wild grass species. I tried to also create brushes for shorter grass and taller grass to make it easier to vary the grass lengths and to go from long grass to short grass or short grass to long grass. I included some seeded grasses and also some noisy detailed brushes that kind of are more a rough concept art look. I also think you can use them to kind of break up more rendered fields and add some kind of noisy hand textured touches. Windswept grasses are next. There are 10 brushes that face to the right and 10 brushes that face to the left. These brushes are designed to create fields that are being blown powerfully by the wind. You can use the block-in brushes to create a base and then add different details and textures on top. So it's really the same as the rest of the brushes, just these are for windswept grasses in particular. And you use sideways motions for these as well. The bushes and small plant brushes can be used as accents in a big field or to create big areas with foliage coverage, anything you want really. Some of these brushes use side-to-side motions like we've been using so far, but others are designed for vertically oriented motions. So if you brush sideways and the plant comes out sideways, it's time to change to up and down motions. Some of the bushes are designed to let you build plants by creating a big stem and then adding branching details. Some of them use a top to bottom approach and others use a bottom to top approach. So just look closely and see if your stroke is having the plant move in the wrong direction. Occasionally I've done that before. The long grasses and reeds function in a vertically oriented fashion too. You can see how we can use these brushes to build up field texture or to build plants for ourselves. And with this design, you never get exactly the same plant twice, which I like a lot, and it allows for a lot of variation and uniqueness in each painting. All right, next up are flowers. You can use these to add little pops of color and detail or to go all out and make a full-on wildflower field. I added a big variety of flowers in this pack, but I also didn't repeat any of the flowers from the last pack. So to have the greatest variety of flower brushes at your disposal, you can use both packs together, and there's a bunch of different species that way. Last but not least are some little mushrooms, and I hope you enjoy playing around with this pack and using it in your paintings. And go ahead and watch the painting demo next if you want to see these brushes in action. Thanks for watching.